I am delighted that you have joined us for this webinar. There are quite a few of us on and more coming on as we go on into the time. This is a difficult time when we think about life in Israel and Palestine. I'd like to thank you for your prayers on behalf of the many, many people there suffering. I'd like to thank you for your concern, for your financial donations, for the MCC response. Special welcome to those of you who are joining as thrift volunteers, where each of your work, each dollar that your work produces contributes to programs of our disaster response. And it is a wonderful network of these stores, and we are grateful for your help. Just a word about some housekeeping. You can submit questions in the chat as we listen to our speakers today. But those questions will be collated, and then we will address as many as we can in the short time we have. Your cameras and microphones will be off, but we'll be able to see your questions. We often feel helpless in the face of suffering in the world, but gathering as we are as God's people to listen, to share, and to pray is part of a faithful response. We cry with the psalmist, "How long, O Lord, how long must I bear pain in my soul, have sorrow in my heart all day long?" For too long, the people who call Palestine and Israel home have suffered under violence, occupation, and the threat of war, and war itself. So together today, we gather for updates from 4 brothers and sisters from Beit Jala, Jerusalem, and Beit Hana. I will introduce each one, and perhaps each of you, when I say your name, could unmute your video and then mute again. And then we will go in the order of the introduction for our sharing today. Starting with Mr. Nader, Anton Abu Amsha. Mr. Nader is a Palestinian Christian from Bethlehem, but he actually lives in Beit Jala, I believe, right close to Bethlehem district. Mr. Nader works as executive director for the Department of Service to Palestinian Refugees in the Middle East Council of Churches, and has been a partner of MCC for many, many years. I'd also like to introduce the Reverend Canon Donald Binder. Dr. Binder is the chaplain to the Anglican Archbishop in Jerusalem and a pastor to the English-speaking congregation. And I would also want to introduce then Sarah Funkhouser and Seth Malone, who are the Mennonite Central Committee representatives for Israel-Palestine, and they're in Beit Hana. So we will start with Mr. Nader, and each of the speakers will take about 10 minutes, and then we'll go from one to the other, and then we'll go from there into a time of questions. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from each of you, our speakers. Mr. Nader.
Yes, thank you, Anne, and thank you, everybody. Thanks for MCC for this opportunity to sharing our response. Thank you for enabling us actually to do some work and to help in lifting the pain and suffering of the people in Gaza. Actually, the situation is, as you might know, is catastrophic in Gaza. Now we are close to the 5 months of war on Gaza. People, more than 30 people has been killed, and there's thousands under rubble. There's close to 70,000 injured people. Situation is unbearable, and there is more than 1.7 million out of 2.2 million people has been displaced to different areas, and mainly to the southern area of Gaza Strip, which is a district of Rafah, which is now under the threat of being invaded. And yeah, the Israeli authorities are declaring that they are putting plans to invade the last district and to continue damaging Gaza Strip. In the northern area, still there is more than 400,000 inhabitants living in Gaza City and in the northern areas of Gaza Strip, where around 800, there is 794 Christian Palestinians refuged to two churches now, the Holy Family Church, Catholic Church, and the St. Porphyrius Orthodox Church. So there's around 800 Palestinian Christians refuged there, and they are living since 7th of October and trying to survive with all of this kind of atrocities and horrible situation. The situation in northern Gaza is unbearable, and there is Israel is preventing any kind of entry to food. And today there was an attempt to bring food to the north, and it has been attacked. And those people who accumulated and they ran to get the food from the trucks or the lorries bringing the food has been hit severely by the Israelis. 100, yeah, it's declared that 112 of them has been killed and more than 700 injured. So they are hungry people, and they are starving actually. We hear the stories of our colleagues and leaders of MECC, where MECC is running a big operation since 50s and in partnership with MCC since tens of years. We in the normal times, if there is any normal times in the life of Gaza, we are running healthcare, primary healthcare centers. We have 3 centers, and we have 3 vocational training centers. We have community programs and community empowerment programs, economic empowerment programs, special response to emergencies. So all of these operations run by an average of 103 staff members. Now they are 100 because we lost 3 of them with their families. Their homes has been damaged and destroyed while they were there. So 3 of them with their families have been killed. And also our operations in the north of Gaza stopped, and as well as in the other areas. The only operations is functioning now for us is in the south, in Rafah, where we are having primary health care with all medical services. Thanks to MCC for supporting us in psychosocial support programs. We are offering psychosocial support programs for the people who are living in the UNRWA schools, those who are suffering all of these experiences of loss and fear and hunger and all of these hard situation. So we work with children and as well as working with groups of mothers. So in our work, we are trying to help these people balance their reaction to what's taking place. It's not a therapy, it's kind of supporting people to reduce the potential of developing their reaction into a psychological illnesses. So it's very essential, and professionally speaking, it's important to intervene in the beginning of the at the beginning of the crisis, and as early as possible after the traumatic experience people went through. So we are trying to help them, release the stresses and ventilate all of these stresses and try to return back to a routine life as much as possible, if there is a possibility there, as well as working with mothers and mothers of children to help them as well. Release their stresses, cooperate with each other and support each other in self-support groups, and enabling them to care about their children and continue their life. So it's part of the programs that's supported by MCC, as well as supported MCC supported a unrestricted cash support, which is offering an average of $190 per household. And we have a strict criteria for people whom we are helping, mainly women who are leading families, sick people, people with disability, all of those who are vulnerable and can't manage their life, especially in the southern part of Gaza. We use the system of PalPay. There's something like PayPal. It's a company. It's a company started several years ago in Palestine by the support of Bank of Palestine, to transfer money to people. So we get their IDs and a phone number, and we send them, or actually the PalPay system send them text message where they receive a code and they go to shops and pharmacies and wherever in Gaza there is there is a list of organizations or list of suppliers where they can go there and buy whatever they like for the amount of money specified in the text message. So this is how we are doing. It's so helpful. It's so helpful in reducing the pain of these people, especially that those people are fleeing from where they were, and they moved and they refuged to different other places before reaching Rafah. They have nothing. They came in October and November, so it was warm in a way. And not too cold like now. Some of them decided to buy some clothes for their kids, some bottles for milk for kids, whatever, some medicine whenever there is no medicine needed, some very personal things that they might need for. So it's very helpful money, very helpful small amount of money given to families to care about their children and themselves in a time of horrible fear and deprivation, where resources are limited. The amount of goods and services offered is very limited. The usual transfer of goods to Gaza used to be 500 trucks a day, and now it's less than 10 trucks a day coming to the whole area of Gaza, and forgot about how much they used to produce in Gaza. So it's very limited resources and a very fearful situation. So I'll stop here, and maybe in the questions I can reply to whatever you might ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Nader. You have given us a good picture of how what it might be like. I'm sure that generates lots of other specific questions, but we will wait until the end. It also has answered some of the questions that came earlier, so I really appreciate the picture you gave us. Let's turn now to Donald.
Thank you, Anne, and welcome. Thank you for welcoming me. And on behalf of Archbishop Hossam, I thank you for all your prayers and support for our work and our ministries here in this incredibly dire situation. For those of your viewers who don't know about the background of the Diocese of Jerusalem, let me just frame it a little bit for them before I kind of narrow in on the crisis at hand. The Diocese of Jerusalem began in the mid-19th century, and in its present form, it encompasses all of the lands where Jesus in his adult earthly ministry ministered. And so that's Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And we have 28 parishes, but also 35 institutions, including more than a dozen schools, rehabilitation centers, school for the deaf, for the blind, retirement homes, and more specifically, apropos our current crisis, 2 hospitals, one in Nablus and one in Gaza. Our hospital in Gaza became very well known because in the second week of the war, there was a massive explosion in its courtyard. And it was about the time that President Biden was heading over here. And there was initial reports that it was from a strike from the Israelis that was disputed the next morning. We're still not sure who it came from. Maybe it came from both. We don't know, one intercepting the other. But many people died that day, that evening. But the hospital miraculously has continued its work. Ali Hospital is not a general hospital. It's a hospital that specializes in cancer diagnosis and treatment, nephrology, has a burn center. It deals with psychosocial for children and also for as a birth ward. And it was really only after Shifa went out of function that Ali became more of a general hospital because the patients that normally would have been sent to Shifa began to be sent to Ali because it was one of the few that was functioning at the time. And with the closure of Shifa too, we also had a number of doctors who came over and began doing surgical procedures, mostly mending broken bones, doing amputations, dealing with burn issues and plastic surgery. And that work went on for quite some weeks. And it was stopped for about 3 days in terms of active treatment the week before Christmas. It was almost a scene from Star Wars, as we heard it described to us. The IDF came into that neighborhood, and it was a heavy presence there, blocked the entryway with their tanks, and sent drones into the courtyard of the hospital and outside its major buildings. And they had these loudspeakers on them. It's like a scene out of Star Wars where they pretty much ordered all of the male staff there to come out and to strip down on threat of their lives. And once they complied with that order, the soldiers came in and took them away. All but 2 doctors, 4 nurses, and 2 janitors to tend to, I think at that time, about 130 patients. Of course, the wards themselves were overwhelmed because they're not used to handling that number of patients. And so some of you have seen the video clips from the WHO that have been posted showing our St. Philip's Chapel there, the pews literally being used as places to lay out the wounded who are waiting for surgery. So the hospital for about 3 days was not able to accept patients, but after the army left, they were able to rebuild a temporary wall in front of the hospital, replacing the one that had been knocked down by the tanks. And we had more volunteer doctors. And plus, our senior staff, thankfully, was not there. They were taking refuge over at the Holy Family Church. And so when they were able to come out and visit the hospital and oversee it, they were able to, continue their management there. In addition to the director of our hospital, who actually managed to leave Gaza and is continuing her logistical work from outside of Gaza itself through telephone and other means. So for those 3 days, they were only tending the patients who were still there, but then they were able to receive patients again. And that continued all the way up until last Thursday. And again, we had a temporary stoppage over the weekend because we ran out of fuel. And we have solar panels there, but because of the bombing and shelling around the hospital, those have been brought down to 20% capacity. And so with cloudy weather late last week, the solar cells weren't able to charge the batteries to make the operating theater lights work. And so they couldn't operate for a few days. And we've had sunny weather for the last few days, so that has changed, and they're back to tending to the patients surgically. In the meantime, of course, they continue to care for them more on a first aid and palliative basis. So, as I said, it's the only hospital that has continued to function in some capacity throughout the length of the war. It's also the only Christian hospital in all of Gaza, and the only one that's still fully functioning, or at least partially functioning, I should say, in Gaza City itself. And as Nader was alluding now, the wider problem we have, not just the fuel I mentioned, which remains an incredible problem, but the fact that there's no food left. And so the messages that we had on Monday from the staff who were there is that the staff and the patients had gone 48 hours without food. And we had been working through channels through the UK and the USA. George Knoll is one of my parishioners. He is the representative of the United States to the Palestinian people here. And so he directly reports through the State Department to the White House. And so you may have read in the papers this morning now, they are thinking, because of the situation, of doing airdrops, which are terribly inefficient in terms of getting amounts of food in there, but it's such a crisis level. And there's very little cooperation at this point from the Israeli army to letting trucks come in through the north, through Eretz crossing, which needs to be repaired anyway for it to serve as a functioning crossing for trucks. So what choice do they have, though, for the, less, somewhere around 500,000? To put that on a scale, that's more people than Tel Aviv that we're talking about here. And the ones who are in Rafah, you're talking about the combined populations of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa. We throw these numbers around, but for those of us who live here, think about the numbers of people in those cities, and you see these sprawling expanses of infrastructure and all of that. It makes those numbers come a little more alive. It's just a massive problem that numbers just don't do justice to. So in terms of what we've been able to do, we've been able to get money in that's been generously contributed from around the world, especially from the United States. And that money is gone to pay the staff salaries and to buy supplies in Gaza. WHO and the UPA have supplied us with medical needs and other perishables. The volunteers have come from Shifa and other hospitals. So Ali continues its mission, and your prayers, advocacy, and financial support have been absolutely key to that all happening. And we thank you all. And as I said, we'll have some questions, I'm sure, coming up. I see some popping up in the windows, but that's sort of the general picture of our work in Gaza right now through the Diocese of Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this sort of vivid kind of images of what is happening right now and has happened earlier. It's heartbreaking and very difficult to hear, and then to know that you're living this every day. I think about you as well. So thank you. Seth and Sarah, can we pass this on to you now? Hear from you, our MCC reps.
Can everyone hear me and see my screen? Good. So I'm Seth Malone.
My name is Sarah Funkhouser.
We're the MCC reps for Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. So in this, we're just focusing on the situation in Gaza and a little bit in the West Bank. I just want to summarize the long history MCC has had here. MCC started its work in 1949 with the refugee crisis created during the Nakba, or the catastrophe. This is around the time of the State of Israel's establishment. There was a lot of refugees that fled as a result of violence. And so MCC responded and is one of the first organizations to respond at that time. So we have a long history in the country. We primarily assisted refugees in Jericho up until 1967, when the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza happened. And at that point, the program shifted its focus to these key things. Our current context here is, you can see the land shrinking over time. This is not a new map, but just to give you context of the long history of Palestinians gradually losing land that was once inhabited by them. So the 2014 map, it's outdated. Those land masses are even smaller for various reasons. And then here, to give you an idea of the Gaza Strip, basically everyone is essentially packed below Khan Yunis in the south. There's a few in the north, but this is a tiny strip of land that we're talking about, where many people have been displaced and pushed due to violence. Okay. You've heard the numbers. Over 30,000 have been killed, at least 70,000 injured, 1.7 million displaced, growing risk of starvation because of lack of water, because Israel has cut off the water sources into Gaza. There's risks of spread of disease, and it's very difficult for people to find clean drinking water. We also, during this crisis, we don't want to forget about the West Bank and East Jerusalem. During this time, there have been mass displacement due to many factors, including increased settler attacks. 400 people have been killed, including 103 children, many more injured, and almost 6,000 people arrested, including 355 children. So the situation in the Gaza crisis, as we're describing, is also, a lot is happening in East Jerusalem and West Bank as well.
So now we'll shift a little bit just to talk about our response. This is a photo from our partner Al Najd Developmental Forum. Shortly after October 7th, Al Najd reached out to us in the midst of all of the chaos and asked this question of, can you help us help? They wanted to respond, they wanted to support their community. So to date, we have supported Al Najd in 3 phases of emergency response to families displaced and affected by the crisis. The first phase was primarily food baskets and mattress and blanket distribution. The second phase was also food distribution, although by the second phase, supplies were already starting to dwindle, so the packages got a little smaller. By the third phase, there was not enough food supply to reliably source for sort of consistent food packages across all of the people that we're trying to help. And so we shifted to doing a hygiene kit distribution instead to support people.
As you heard from Nader, we've been supporting DSPR in their work. This is the mental health and psychosocial intervention that they're doing. It's psychological ventilation. It's a term used to basically get out all the stress as much as possible. So you can see the large number of children at this UNRWA school and the mothers group as well. We're also supporting cash assistance projects. One of them is through the DSPR for around $60,000. And then we have another partner in Gaza, Culture and Free Thought Association. Early on in the crisis, we did a $20,000 cash assistance project for them. They were helping families that were taking refuge in their centers.
And like Seth mentioned, this crisis, although very acute in Gaza, is affecting the whole. And so the YMCA Women is one of our partners in the West Bank. We supported them with an emergency response to vulnerable communities in 2 governorates in the West Bank, providing emergency food relief to 17 communities that were facing threats of displacement due to settler and military violence. So through that project, we supported over 1,000 families, about 7,000 people. You can see on the box here the YMCA logo and MCC's logo, and the Arabic script in this photo translates to "We are with you." Also in the West Bank, we have supported a response with our partner Arij, the Applied Research Institute of Jerusalem. In the Bethlehem area, a large portion of the economy is dependent on tourism. With the crisis, that tourism has significantly declined, and so many families have lost their income due to this decline. And so through Arij, we supported 200 households in the Bethlehem area, providing training and agricultural inputs to these households so people could grow some of their own food, both for consumption and possibly to sell.
I should have had someone triple check the numbers, but this is what I did to give you an idea of what we're working with so far. What I mean by pivot projects here, these are existing projects that we had in Gaza that due to the situation, we were unable to complete. So we pivoted that money into emergency response, into some of the things that we've been showing you. HAF is Humanitarian Assistance Funds. These are additional funding that was raised to respond to crises like this one. And then core funding is what we have from just our normal budget that we've allocated to specifically addressing this crisis. About, in total, it's $430,000. In the West Bank, it's $126,000. Gaza, $310,000. We're also in the middle of implementing or trying to implement a Canadian Food Grains Bank project. This is funded with ultimately Canadian government funded money. And it's a large project focused on distributing food packages to people in Gaza. Right now, we are working to get the food from Jordan shipped to Gaza. We had a viable path for a while, and due to basically the Israelis not letting aid in various ways, shapes, or forms, this project, we have the food. You can see it being inspected and packed here. It's ready to go. It's in the warehouse, but we're still waiting for a truck and the ability to get it into Gaza. So we hope that the first truck that we'll be sending will leave in the next, basically as soon as possible. So yes, we're excited for this project and we hope it works. But yeah, we are facing incredible challenges with getting aid in, as well as many other, basically every organization is facing incredible challenges.
So I also would just like to take the opportunity to touch a little bit on what our Israeli partners have been saying in the midst of this crisis. We are very lucky to work with Israeli partners who share MCC's commitment to nonviolence. And the photo on the left here is from our partner new profile, which focuses on providing support to those who would like to opt out of the compulsory military service within Israel. And the photo on the right is from Zochrot, which is our partner who focuses on education within Israeli society around the Nakba, the catastrophe that Seth mentioned earlier, and that history, both the history and the continuation of that event, as well as advocating for the right of return for Palestinian refugees. And I just would like to read the quote on the right out loud. The way to peace is very long, and every moment the first step is delayed can only mean greater pain and suffering. Things can be different, they have to be. A safe and peaceful life in a just society is still possible for all people living between the Jordan and the sea, and all refugees wishing to return. Like I said, we are really lucky to work with these partners, and to acknowledge that the current iteration of the violence that has been going on for decades is not good for anyone. It's not good for Palestinians, and it's not good for Israelis. And the message here also is one of hope, that we can choose a different path, and we can work toward something different. Just wanted to highlight that work.
And so this is the main ask that we're working on, especially in terms of our advocacy. There must be a ceasefire, unconditional. It needs to be forced if needed, but we need a ceasefire. The situation is just untenable. We need a release of all civilian hostages. This is very important, and by all we mean anyone locked up in prison as well. So there's a lot of Palestinian prisoners that are unlawfully detained. We're calling for a release of all peoples. There must be humanitarian aid allowed into Gaza. Right now, this is the amount of trucks it's trickling, and the amount of need is immense. So we need all barriers that have been erected to be removed. And ultimately, these top three things are in the short and medium term, but we need a just peace. This can't continue to happen. This is the worst it's been in many, many years, if ever. But it's always been here since 1948, since the start of the conflict. So we need to work towards a just peace for all peoples that live on the land, that they live together in dignity and security, and that they can enjoy the fruits of the land in peace.
Thank you, Seth and Sarah. Thanks to all of you, all four of you, for sharing. We have about 20 minutes now to enter a time of questions. Lots of thoughts go through my mind, particularly when I think about the history and the history of pain, the history of violence. I grew up with a small needlepoint that said Bethlehem, a needlepoint cloth on our telephone table that my mother always kind of referred to as connecting to some of the earliest MCC work with Palestinian refugees. And that would have been from the early 50s. So this has been part of my awareness of the needs in the world. And I think that's true for many of the people that are listening today. All of you talked about a lot of the complexities and the shifts that have to happen when you're in the midst of a crisis. We heard about the shift in what a hospital needs to do, a shift from personnel moving from here to there, a shift in kind of having to pivot, as you said, even calling that our funds calling pivot funds, because we were going to use it for this and now we're going to use it for this because it's not available. I think one of the biggest access questions or humanitarian need questions, kind of a combination of questions would be kind of just today, or in these days, what do you, and this would be for any of the four of you, what do you see as the best ways to support? I heard you talking about multiple prongs, psychosocial support, cash, but right now, what are you thinking about these days, most specifically in terms of the best way to support both folks in Gaza and West Bank, but also in terms of advocacy?
We can go first, and we would love other people on the panel to speak. The cash transfers are fantastic, but there's only so much supplies left in Gaza to buy. So it's a Band-Aid. The psychosocial support, again, is fantastic, but we don't want to keep doing this program, and there shouldn't be any need for psychosocial support. So really what the people need is advocacy. It's like all the constraints on letting in humanitarian aid are political. They're not logistical. We need advocacy from everyone to remove these barriers. And then also they need a ceasefire. And I know I'm answering your question in a different way, but we're worried about our partners because they're delivering aid in a war zone, and that's untenable. They need a ceasefire to be able to deliver aid. We're working really well with the funds that we're given. We're doing everything we can to use them wisely and to get impact for the dollar. But really what we need is these like the big things, and then we would go so much farther. We would meet so many more needs, and we'd be able to help so many more people. So multi-pronged, you're right, Anne.
Yeah, if I may, I add my voice to Seth, that advocacy is the most needed, and actually putting pressure to stop this horrible war and to stop killing, and to be actually consistent with our faith and belief. I can't imagine churches, many churches can't call for stop this kind of fire. Can't say that we are with the ceasefire. If churches is not saying that, who should say that? So I believe this is one of the main things that should have been said earlier, and still it's needed to cease fire and to open doors for people to receive humanitarian aid. We shouldn't sleep while people are looking for grass to eat in order not to die. We shouldn't just see it as something happening while people are relaxing with the luxury of discussions and talks and analyzing and whatever. So it's a life-saving. So yes, we need support. We need people to receive relief services, but at the same time, and most important, to stop the killing of people and stop all of these reasons for killing people.
And if I may add, I agree with the advocacy as being key right now, and also to point out we are at a real crossroads, because we are a week and a half away from the start of Ramadan. And everybody is now aware of that if this doesn't come to a ceasefire by Ramadan, this could spark into a much larger regional war with Hezbollah uniting rockets. Hamas has already called for a massive march on Al-Aqsa, on the 10th of March. And that in and of itself could spark big problems beyond Gaza and spill into East Jerusalem and where we live and the West Bank. And I think the world knows that. Certainly the White House knows that, and they are pushing very, very hard. And I think they are getting very close for this 40-day ceasefire deal with the hostage trade being kind of spread out. And it's been theorized that Hamas is sort of waiting to get to the edge of Ramadan so they can kind of declare this a victory at Ramadan. I don't know if that's a true theory or not, but the point is that the advocacy really needs to push this over the finish line right now, because if we can get a 40-day ceasefire, then there is a possibility that we can get aid in there more quickly. People can come out and feel safe in terms of movement. We have some people who have exits out of Rafah, and they want to leave and be reunited with their families, at least on the short term. So they would be able to do that. They've been holed up in the north, waiting for that opportunity. So, this next week and a half is going to be key. So if we can just raise our voices more and more, that this actually does happen, I think there can be a hope for this going at least through the 40 days, getting help to the people who need it, and then hopefully, calming things down so that it can be extended even beyond the 40 days. So I just wanted to point that out. We are really at a crossroads now.
I appreciate your both of you speaking to the immediate need and the immediate moment, and perhaps this moment. And it's been months, and we have had pressure, but now may seem opportune. 2 weeks ago, I was part of a delegation of the churches of the Middle East for Middle East peace in the state. I had a couple of meetings in the State Department, and we were sort of struck by how each branch of the U.S. government, I don't know what's happening in the Canadian government, each branch is blaming the other. Like State Department says, well, the White House is doing things, we can't do much, and then congressional folks, it feels like people are blaming each other. So it feels like we need to be more focused on all of those. A very, very specific response to humanitarian aid linked to a question related to getting aid in. If there was a ceasefire, how long would it take for aid to be, are trucks poised to go in, or are people waiting? Could it be immediate? How might that work?
So, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say the trucks are backed up at all of the crossings, and it's just a matter of what's written into the ceasefire. If the ceasefire says that more trucks can come in and that's adhered to, then I won't say it's problem solved, but certainly being addressed more fully than it has been.
Exactly. The ceasefire is, stopping the violence, but then you still have all the restrictions that are placed on us, on like what trucks can go in, how many are scanned per day. Are we going to let protesters prevent trucks from entering Gaza? So, these questions, there's still all the political questions on, are you actually going to let aid in? So we hope that they do, but there's very little movement at this time.
And I think this just again kind of highlights, I'm sorry, Nader.
No, please go ahead.
I think this highlights the really like the political nature of this issue, because organizations, UN entities, other humanitarian organizations, we all have the logistical capacity. We have the know-how. These organizations have responded in other disaster and crisis scenarios. These mechanisms exist. It is the political situation that is preventing those mechanisms from working, from doing their job.
I think it's possible, but I think the intention of this very extreme government in Israel might continue their plan. The idea is to make Gaza unbearable and not a place for living. So if there is no pressure, and if there is no real guarantee that the relief services offered and the relief materials and the all of this kind of aid reaching the people, it will continue like what happened today. It continue attacking those lorries and trucks coming to bring food to people or medicine or whatever. If they are not lifting the hospital and refunctioning the hospital like Ahli Hospital and other hospitals, so people will keep dying for the limitation of supplies or medical resources. If they are not putting pressure on those settlers or those extremists who are trying to prevent any kind of reach of even the MCC lorries and which is loaded now and waiting to be entered Gaza, it's prevented because of those who are preventing, actually physically going to the streets and stopping any lorry coming inside the checkpoint. So without this kind of political pressure to put in Israel, nothing will be improved. So it's a political issue, and it's a matter of really putting our faith in action and supporting all of these attempts to put pressure on Israel to let it happen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let me broaden it back out now a little bit, because of I think often we aren't quite sure how to do the political pressure in a way that honors all people. A number of the questions that we've seen have to do with, like, how do we talk about? Do you have advice on how to talk about the humanitarian concerns in Gaza, but also distancing ourselves or not feeding into the anti-Semitism that is on the rise? How do you separate out political issues with other isms that are out there? How do we talk to our friends and neighbors, perhaps Jewish friends who are feeling put upon, even though they want to also put political pressure on, but feel judged themselves? Yes.
I think one easy way to do that is to speak about the current Netanyahu government, which, as we all know, is the most extreme in Israel's history. And even before the Gaza war, half the country was protesting against it. And many overseas, from the diaspora, were very, very upset with what was happening in Israel. Now, because of the war, at least temporarily, the ranks have closed, supporting the troops and all of that, common thing to happen. Nevertheless, I think there's still a recognition for many people, and at least in the back of their minds, that this government here is damaging the image of Israel around the world. And the partners that Netanyahu has chosen for his government are all seen as extremists, doing things that, you have Jewish groups in New York City and elsewhere, with T-shirts doing things like going to the Statue of Liberty, closing down Grand Central Station, other acts with the T-shirts say, "Not in my name," because this is not what they believe the faith of Judaism encompasses. It's abhorrent. And so many liberal Jews in the United States are abhorred by what they're seeing going on here by this current government. So talk about the Netanyahu government. I think that's the easiest way to handle it.
I think also it's this is totally right, but I think we should be free from this kind of manipulation of Zionism. Actually, the Zionist movement is kind of tailoring ready accusations for whoever criticizing Israel, regardless whether this is a right criticism or not. Israel is beyond criticism. Should be like this. This is we should free ourselves from this kind of censoring what we are saying. If the only accepted thing should be when we are talking about things related to international law and international legitimacy. Whenever we are talking about rights, we are talking about valid rights and legitimate rights and acknowledged rights by international legitimacy. We shouldn't fear all of these accusations because it's the manipulation. They are manipulating people out of this. Whoever speaking about rights, whoever speaking about rights of Palestinians, will be readily accused of being hating Jews or anti-Semitic or whatever. So it's important to get out of this kind of manipulation and feel free to be pro-rights rather than subject to all of this kind of manipulation.
Thank you. Thank you. Seth and Sarah, did you have something to add?
The question, I understand where the question is coming from, but from where we are on the ground, it's really hard because what we're seeing is starving human beings. And then when we're told that there's anti-Semitism issues, we're like, no, but there's people that are at risk of dying because they don't have food. And so it's jarring, and I'm not saying those concerns are unfounded, but I think there is this dire humanitarian situation that we're just grappling with, and it seems very foreign. That how are these issues even connected? I don't understand why they're even connected in the first place. So I'm being a little dense, but that's how we feel here.
I wouldn't call it dense. I would call it pretty straightforward. And I think it goes back to what Nader said about things get politicized and then we become afraid and lose sight of the humanity of each human being made in the image of God, as some of you mentioned before. We have just a minute. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, and I think what we are advocating for when we are advocating for peace, when we're advocating for safety and dignity, we are advocating that for all people. That is not, we're not making a distinction there. So I think like Seth, if that is our ask, if that is our call to advocate for peace, if that's what we really mean, for peace for all people, for me it's hard to see then, like Seth said, where these issues actually intersect.
Well said. We could go on for a long time with very specific questions and also broader questions. I think many of these questions, for those of you that are sitting there in the middle of this, I think many of our questions come out of we want to do something, we care, we don't know a lot, we know some things, and it's always nuanced through whatever means we receive it. And we want to share with you now our care and love and support. For those of us, on the participants on this, I thank you for your joining us to learn more. Part of it would be easy just to ignore this, but you took the time today to join this webinar. to engage, to listen, to feel the pain. I think some of the things we can offer is just simply agreeing to carry pain for people, as well as then act as much as we can in advocacy, in prayer, in our financial support. And I thank each of you for doing that. Thanks to you, our panelists today. Thanks to the team who helped make this webinar possible. And thanks be to God for guiding us and staying with us, even though we often wonder why. We still hold to the faith that God will bring good out of this, and continue to ask God to work in our hearts to show us what we need to do. So appreciate your time with us today. Blessings to each of you.